Have you ever noticed one of the most curious currents in the river of awareness? It is the moment you realize you are changing, like a season, while the world around you remains the same. And this unfolding creates a most peculiar and silent predicament. It is rather like the moment a caterpillar begins to dream of becoming a butterfly, while still surrounded by dear friends who are quite content simply being caterpillars. Now, let us explore this, for it is a passage, a doorway, that almost every soul who begins to truly awaken must walk through. And it can feel like the most profound solitude, a deep and echoing silence. It can be a bewildering dance, and yes, a journey across a fragile, beautiful bridge. When I speak of danger, I do not mean a physical confrontation, though, of course, the tides of history have certainly told such stories. No, this is a peril of the spirit. It is the risk of losing the very reflection that once defined you, the harbor that once felt like home. Let us begin with this truth. Growth is not a comfortable process. It has never been so, and it never will be. When a lobster's world becomes too small, it must cast off its shell, exposing itself, soft and open to the currents, until a new home can form around it. In that interlude, it is in a state of profound vulnerability, a tender morsel in a vast ocean. But what if the lobster were to refuse this shedding, this sacred release? If it clings to the illusion of safety, it ceases to become. It remains encased, a prisoner of its own past, unable to flow into the fullness of its being. We are not so different. We outgrow the brittle shells of our beliefs, our connections, our maps of the world. And in that moment of release, we too become exquisitely vulnerable. We drift away from the warmth of the crowd, the gentle hum of conformity. The security of being just another wave in the ocean dissolves. This raw openness is the danger I speak of. So then, what does it truly mean to outgrow the familiar shores around you? It is not that you have ascended to some higher place, or that you are somehow better. This is a subtle trap. Many fall into this illusion, and it is a sign that the real journey has not yet begun. They have only traded one costume of the ego for another. No, that is not it at all. To outgrow is to begin perceiving a light that others do not yet see. It is to ask questions that have not yet formed on the lips of others. It is to take a step outside the shared dream of reality, while they continue to slumber peacefully within it. Perhaps a quiet question has begun to ripple across the still surface of your mind. This restless dance for status, for security. This gathering of things as a shield against time. The endless cascade of noise and diversion that we use to fill the great silence. And perhaps you have seen that the destination promised by all this striving is a mirage on the horizon. That these are hollow promises, mere echoes of a much deeper unacknowledged thirst. A fundamental case of mistaken identity about the very nature of this cosmic play and our part in it. Or perhaps, in the quietude of meditation or in the stillness of deep thought, through the fire of crisis, or a door suddenly opened, a spontaneous parting of the veils has occurred, and it has shown you that reality is far more like a flowing river than a solid rock, that it is woven from the very fabric of consciousness, unlike the separate, solid world we pretend is there. You have seen, for a moment, the illusion of the separate, isolated self. Or you have at least glimpsed the light behind the curtain, and the memory of it now colors everything. When this dawns, you find yourself in a curious position, living as a citizen of two worlds at once. There is the world, as it is commonly agreed upon, the world of schedules and commerce, of politics and plans, the world where everyone is playing their role with the utmost seriousness. And then there is this other, this deeper current, this silent, vast reality, ever present, but to which most people are completely asleep. And you must learn the delicate art of walking in both of these worlds. You must, in a sense, become fluent in two entirely different languages, the language of the everyday and the silent language of the eternal. To be in the world, as the wise say, but not of it. And this, you see, is a wonderfully tricky balancing act. For the two worlds dance to different music, they follow different laws, they have different ways of weaving the tapestry of experience. The people who surround you, your family, your dearest friends, your companions in work, they are still dreaming entirely within the conventional story. They are absorbed in the drama of their careers, the architecture of their finances, their reflection in the mirror of society, their maps for a future that is only ever an idea. And these concerns, which once seemed to be the very center of your world, now appear as distant stars, as if they are beside the point. Not because your heart has grown cold or distant, but because your eyes have glimpsed a much wider sky, a more fundamental horizon. A more profound game is afoot. But you cannot simply explain the nature of water to a fish. Imagine sharing a meal with your family and you say, "I've begun to see that the self is a beautiful story, and that we are all waves of one single boundless ocean." They may look at you as if you have drifted away from a familiar shore. And in a sense, you have. You've drifted from the mind of convention, the mind woven by society, and you have not yet found the words to describe the new waters you are exploring. So, for a time you may find solace in silence, or speak in the poetry of quiet hints. You begin to seek out others who recognize the currents you are navigating, and it is here that a curious sense of solitude can begin to arise. The people you love seem to be living in a reality whose colors have subtly shifted from your own. You are speaking different languages of the heart, seeking different horizons. You are looking at the same world, but through a completely different window. And they feel this. Even without the words, they sense that you are listening to a different music now. They perceive that you have changed in some deep, unspoken way. You are no longer playing the grand game with the same hurried enthusiasm. And this can stir the waters, for if you can step outside the agreed-upon dream, then perhaps the dream is not as solid as they had always believed. Perhaps their own reality is built upon the shifting sands of thought. Some will try to call you back to the shore, to invite you back into the familiar dance. "You've changed," they will say, and the words will not sound like a compliment. They might accuse you of floating in the clouds, of being impractical, of being absorbed in a self that you are beginning to see through. They will remind you of your part in the play, of the roles and the rules. They will do all they can to gently place you back within the comfortable lines you've outgrown. Others will simply allow a quiet distance to grow between you, like a mist. The conversations that once flowed like a river now feel shallow and forced. The common ground between you seems to have vanished, little by little. The connection does not break with a crash, but fades like an echo, a slow, sad drifting apart. Still others may greet your inner stillness with an outer storm. This is especially true if you have outgrown a structure of belief they still inhabit. If you were raised within the walls of a certain faith, and you have now walked out into the open sky, when you question the stories and find them to be but echoes, your very being becomes a ripple in the still water of belief. You become the outsider, the one who has wandered from the path, a reflection they feel must be polished back into place or shattered. This is the subtle peril. It is not a threat to the body, though that too can be a wave in this ocean, but a threat to your harbor, your community, the warmth of your tribe, that deep and wordless sense of belonging to the great dance. For we are, after all, creatures of connection, woven from the threads of relationship. We long to feel ourselves as a note in a grander song, to be seen and to be held in place. And when you begin to flow beyond the riverbanks they know, you risk this deep communion. Now you might wonder, well, why not simply remain silent in this knowing? Why not continue to play the part, to wear the mask? Why not keep this inner world a secret garden? And you see, many do just this. They live in two currents at once, maintaining the outward form while knowing inwardly that it is all a marvelous game, a wonderful, intricate performance. And there is a certain quiet grace in this way. As we've said, you do not roughly shake a person from a beautiful dream unless the dream itself has caught fire. But this strategy has its own ghosts. First, it is a tremendous expenditure of life. To live as two separate reflections, to constantly filter the river of your own thoughts, to edit your own silence, pretending to be moved by tides that no longer pull you. This act consumes the very peace you've found. You become a stranger in your own house, divided, a fractured mirror. The very wholeness, the seamless unity you were seeking through your own unfolding, becomes an impossible shore, for you are constantly turning your back on your own inner compass. Second, it is a departure from the authentic. And authenticity, this being true to the pattern you now see, is the very heartwood of this journey. If you have witnessed something true, something real, and you conceal it, deny its light, refuse to walk by it, then what, after all, was the point of opening your eyes? You become as one who has unearthed a magnificent jewel but is too afraid to let it shine. So they rebury it in the earth and go on living as if in darkness. Third, and perhaps most profoundly, your very presence, your silence, your way of being, communicates its own music. People feel the resonance, the vibration, the unspoken truth. If you have truly changed, if you have genuinely begun to see beyond the painted backdrop of the world, it will show in 1,000 subtle ways, in the stillness of your attention, in the depth of your gaze, in how you meet the tides of life, in the music of your laughter, and the depth of your silence, in the very dance of your being. And so you arrive at a curious juncture, for you cannot return to the dream once you've awakened. The bell, once rung, cannot be unrung. Yet the path forward seems shrouded in mist, for every step echoes with a certain cost, with a letting go of old shores, a voyage into a vast, silent sea of not knowing. This, you see, is what the sages of old called the dark night of the soul. It is the silent space between two notes, the doorway between one world and another. It is the dissolution of the caterpillar, before it remembers its wings and becomes the butterfly. And the night feels dark only because the old maps have been discarded, the familiar stars have vanished. The solid ground of certainty has dissolved, but the new shore is not yet in sight. You are floating in the great in-between, a wanderer in a sacred wilderness. In this space, a profound sense of solitude may arise. The mind may whisper, "Have I lost my way?" As if you have traded a solid world for a fleeting, fanciful dream. A nostalgia may surface for the comfort of the game, for the time when you knew your part, when the music played and you simply danced the steps you were taught, without question. But let us look closer at this, for this feeling of being apart. This profound solitude is not a signal that you have strayed from the path. On the contrary, it is the path itself. It is the quiet, necessary prelude to a great unfolding. In every great story ever told, the hero must first leave the safety of the known world, journey into the deep forest, and meet the shadows alone before discovering the hidden jewel. And this jewel, this treasure, is nothing other than your own authentic nature, the boundless being you are, unburdened by the roles and rules you were asked to play. But one cannot grasp this reality while still seeking applause from the audience of the old play, from those who reflect the very dream you are leaving. You must be willing to walk your own way, to be a mystery to others, to have your silence misinterpreted, to be a wave that doesn't follow the tide. Now let us be careful here. This is not a call to arms, not a suggestion to build walls. It is not an invitation to alienate, nor to stand on a mountaintop and declare oneself above the valley. It is not to push away those who are still dreaming the dream you are waking from, for that is the most subtle game of the ego, to create a new separation in the name of unity. It simply means you allow the river of your own becoming to flow, accepting its course with a gentle and spacious heart. You come to see that each soul is a river, flowing at its own pace. And they are simply dancing to the music they can hear, with the awareness they currently possess. So there is no judgment, only a quiet recognition that your streams are diverging for a time. And in this quiet space, a trust emerges, a trust in the great flow to bring you your own. If fellow travelers are a part of your unfolding story, they will simply arrive. For here is the beautiful, unspoken secret. When you shed one skin, when the tide of your being recedes from one shore, you are not left in an empty ocean. You discover other islands, other souls who have felt the same pull of the moon, a new sense of belonging, a new resonance, a gathering of spirits who understand the silence between your words. They see the reflection of their own journey in your eyes and ask the same infinite questions to the stars. This, you see, is the ancient pattern, the timeless rhythm of seekers across the ages. They have always gathered in quiet monasteries, in vibrant ashrams, in circles of shared wonder. These were never places of exclusion, you see, never an attempt to build walls, but rather they were a need for a mirror, a reflection from another who understood the nature of the dream. They sought a hand to hold as they crossed the threshold from one reality into another, to be reminded that the inner landscape is real, that this path is not a fantasy, that the very process of awakening is the destination. But these gatherings are often like streams flowing beneath the surface. They are not found in the marketplaces of the world. They do not shout their names from the rooftops. You stumble upon them when the time is ripe, when your own inner quiet becomes a homing beacon, when the ache of solitude transforms into a genuine call, and the universe answers in surprising ways. A whisper from a stranger on a train, a book that seems to find you, not the other way around. A guide who emerges from the mist just as the path ahead becomes unclear. So the art of it is not to grasp at the ghosts of what was, simply for fear of the coming silence. Nor is it to sever the roots of your past in a flash of what you might call spiritual pride. There is, as always, a middle way, a gentle dance of holding on and letting go. You tend to the connections that still ring with authenticity. You honor the soil from which you grew. You remember the love that held you before this new season. But you do not betray the present to preserve the past. You cannot play a smaller part in the drama just so others do not have to squint at your light. And then, the most wondrous thing can happen. The very people around you begin to stir. Your own unfolding becomes the silent invitation for their own journey to begin. They begin to see in you a reflection, a certain peace, a clarity that flows, a kind of freedom. And this awakens a quiet longing in them. They begin to ask, not for answers, but to understand. And so, the dance of the relationship transforms with you, finding a new depth, a more resonant truth. It becomes more honest, more vibrantly alive. But you see, you cannot force the tide. You cannot command a seed to grow. All you can do is simply be, to rest in the authenticity of your own unfolding, to be the living expression of what you have come to see, and trust that those who are listening will hear the music. The rest will drift away like leaves on a stream, and you must allow them to go, with a quiet love, with gratitude for the part they played in the grand dance of your journey. Even if that part of the music has now faded to silence, the sense of outgrowing your world is not an illusion. You may find old friendships dissolving like mist, or the shores of family receding. The communities that once were your mirror may no longer reflect you. You may pass through a season of profound solitude, and the mind may ask, was the journey worth the leaving? But allow me to offer this perspective. A reflection gleaned from watching countless travelers on this very same river. On the other side of this seeming void is a vastness, a freedom, and an authenticity you could not have imagined. a depth of being that reveals all the losses to be worthwhile, because what you gain is simply yourself. Your true nature, not the self that was carefully built to fit into the spaces provided. The one designed to please others, to fulfill a role in their play. And once you have found this, once you have tasted the water from your own spring, you realize that nothing of any real substance was ever lost at all. You were only letting go of illusions, of masks, of borrowed identities. The true connections, the love that is not a bargain, the community of the heart. These either remain or they appear anew, more deeply rooted and truer than before. So if you feel yourself drifting beyond the old horizons, know that you are not alone in this. Even in your solitude, you are part of a timeless process. It is a season of the soul, this loneliness, and like all seasons, it will pass. This sense of being between two worlds, know that the courage it takes to continue, to stay true to the light you have seen, even when it asks for everything familiar, is profound. This courage is the mark of a true explorer of the inner landscape, a genuine seeker of what is real. The world of the caterpillar must dissolve for the butterfly to be born. There is no other way. But what emerges is a beauty so much more vast, a freedom so much more vibrant than what was let go. Trust the process. Trust in the rhythm of your own unfolding, and in the silent wisdom of the great current, for it is carrying you to the very place your soul needs to be, even when the path meanders through valleys of shadow and the mists of not knowing.